Good morning, everybody. If I would have known the introduction is taking so much time, I would have shortened my presentation. I'm sorry about that, but I'd like to at least want to tell you that I'm feeling extremely honored and privileged to be the first speaker today. And when the Sinterkaffee committee reached out to me, I spontaneously said, yes, I would love to do that. And then I had a second thought, which was, oh God, what are you going to talk about? Because I'm here in front of the world-class coffee experts from all around the world. You are combining centuries of coffee experience and knowledge. And who am I to tell you new news? So to manage your expectations, I'm afraid, and lots of people already came to me and saying they have lots of expectations, there's little, if any, new news. So I'm seeing everybody stays in the room, so that's good. That's good news. So at least I can carry on a little bit with my thinking and my thoughts. So if I named the presentation Strategic Restlessness, this was about considering change. The change we are experiencing, the change we are going through in our world we are living in today. So change, if we can agree to this, is a constant. And most of you are gathering together and coming here preliminary to do networking, to exchange with old friends, with old business colleagues. And very often you tend to talk about the good old days, the good past. There's one thing I can tell you, it's not coming back. So it's all about things are changing and are changing faster in this world we have. So when I thought about change and put some meaning behind it, I thought about what is the source of power behind the change. And one being political aspects, and one thing, if it is about coffee, which comes to my mind, even though it's some years ago, and the older ones remember that, it has to do with the quota system we had and where we regulated the coffee trading. But also the heavily involvement of, for instance, the Colombian government in coffee planting has an impact on us as an industry. That's something we need to take care about. And you see the Millennium Goals displayed here, which are also combining the series of activities governments are committed to. So that's one aspect we have. And you see all these forces, they're somehow interconnected, and it's very difficult to say at one point in time where they were coming from or who was first. Because then we have the economic, and we're all used to the volatility in the coffee market. And this chart just shows the average volatility over the last 30 years in coffee. And we just talked about it in the opening, that prices are massive in change. Now, we're used to it. We have found ways of dealing with it. But at the same time, we are just following it. We are not driving this. So we as an industry and participant in the coffee supply chain, we need to think about how can we influence coffee to the good, because today we are dominated by those who are not fundamentally trading coffee. It's those who are making the profit out of it, but who are not really having an interest in the coffee itself. So as an industry, we are very committed in trying to find ways in overcoming this uncertainty which is related to the volatility of our commodity, the coffee. The other thing which is noticeable is obviously the society shift which is pushing. There's a lot of demand coming from society, people in these days that like to know where the food is coming from, where it is coming from. They're interested in understanding more about where the coffee is sourced, and that's great news. And that's in particular true for those who are born about the change of, around the change of the century. Those people, this young generation, has a different access to information, to technology. They are really living a global community. They are having knowledge about what's going on, and they are demanding because they have a fair understanding about global economy. So they are really in the digital age driving, and think about the changes we have experienced in the last years only in factors like mobile phones, for instance. Now, the next part is the technology itself, and this shows how long it did take the different categories to reach a penetration of 25%. And you see, obviously, aviation took a long time, and some of them, like VCR, has taken over 3 decades and disappeared already. So some of those things which have taken a long time have gone by now. And you see now, for instance, the iPhone might take only 5 years to come to 25% penetration. So on the coffee side, our own thoughts are that in certain countries in Europe, we have outperformed this 25% in penetration if it is about closed systems working with pressure extraction of coffee. So that's the good news, that we also consider there's a lot of change from a technology point of view in the coffee side. Now, this picture could have been taken almost anywhere in the countries you are coming from, whether it's Guatemala, it's Colombia, it's Costa Rica. We all know about the impact of environmental changes and the impact we are feeling today. Again, and as an industry, and we all together, we need to work on how we can mitigate this risk. What can we do in order to overcome these issues we are facing there? So the environmental climate change is being felt everywhere, and it has an impact on us as an industry. And there are lots of discussions later on during these next 2 days which are covering this topic. And then, on top of that, we have the legal and regulatory impact. And again, on the coffee side, sometimes it's for good that there are changes, like the decision of the Costa Rican government to change the legislation for water treatment early in the 90s. It did cost the industry $100 million, but at the end of the day, it's how to reach sustainable standards and treat the water in a proper way. So we have lots of impacts there coming, and very often they are doing good. We see that on all foods aspects, legislation is changing, the labeling on the packs has to change. All of this requires the industry to react and do things differently. And there's little you can do about it. You need to react to it. So these are the forces coming from outside impacting us. Now, the coffee value chain itself is already very complex because you have all of these forces having an impact on us, and at the same time there are many stakeholders there. So you need to align amongst all of these different stakeholders, unify objectives and trying to understand how you can work together. And I remember in the 90s, I was sitting in the German Coffee Association in a working group about sustainability, and we asked ourselves, what can we do? And we were sitting in front of this huge challenge, and we were almost ready to give up because we didn't know how to tackle it. And then later on, we had 4C, and we're going to have a presentation from 4C as well later on. So we are changing the industry standards, and we are changing also compliance level, which is good news. So that's complex. This is known by all of us. But on the other hand, we have those guys, the consumers. And the consumers are obviously changing as well. And again, very rapidly in the way they consume, in the way they demand, in the way they express their interest in coffee. We had the first wave, which was basically about giving access to roast and ground coffee to every single household. Then we had the second wave, which is still existing, obviously. And then the third wave is coming, where we have more individual companies. And we have Blue Bottle here, we have Starbucks here representing the different waves here. So we see that the consumers are expecting much more about the product. So we need to adapt to this, and we anticipate what they want. Like this year, the big hit in the summer was cold brewed coffee. Whether it's in London or in certain cities in the US, it becomes very popular. So we need to react to it. And it might require not only a different recipe, but also different ways of preparing the coffee, or even different ways of blending the coffee. So here, obviously, is a big change influence coming towards the industry. So the question for us is, how do you respond to this? And that's not only a response which is true for the industry. What I'd like to really emphasize on is that this can be done at any level. This change and embracing change is something which is important for farmers, it's for the suppliers we have in between, the green coffee trading houses. We need to change roles every now and then. We need to reflect on what we are doing. Otherwise, you're stuck. And there are many examples. We have here Kodak, for instance. So the choice they took is ignore, resist, and they didn't manage to change. It's not that they were not into technology. They invented digital photography, but what they didn't see was the forces from outside, which was the digital phones, the mobile phones, which were coming and basically replacing them. Now this company, which was an innovation leader, is being out of business. So it doesn't exist anymore. Who would have thought that? They were really the leaders in their category. So this is about creative disruption. This is about changes, and this is about renewing a whole category through innovation, which is making an old one obsolete. And this is happening faster and faster these days. So there are possible responses in embracing change and just moving on to do something different. So one thing we have done, for instance, is we launched earlier this year a new extraction system, which is basically combining the world of espresso, where Nespresso is coming from, with coffee. And that has been launched in the United States of America. So I talked about this a lot, and I would love to offer you this product. And I, at the same time, mentioned earlier that we have sometimes some legislation issues, and here in particular, we are a victim of that. So our coffee is stuck at customs. So even though Nespresso is the sponsor of the coffee break today, we don't have the coffee. Please bear with me in spirit, and we are trying very hard to get the coffee out. So if Lera is dancing here with a sleeve, she comes and then the coffee has been released from the customs. So if not, we're obviously trying as much as we can to have it at latest tomorrow. It's a bit of a shame, but that's what I said. These are forces which are very difficult to predict and sometimes to manage. So, striving it, this new system is allowing us to really enhance the customer experience, and that's what Nespresso is all about. But as I said earlier, changes can happen at farm level. I've been a few times to Campo de Minas, Poço de Caldas in Brazil, and the farmers I've met there, they were really changing also the way they look at coffee. They were looking into quality. They were not talking about prices anymore, which was quite impressive for me, having been in coffee for 30 years, to travel on a coffee farm. And we didn't talk about price. We talked about quality. We talked about how we can improve it, and we talked about long-term vision. And I believe that there is really a change due, that we need to rethink about the long-term rather than the short-term volatility in the markets. So now, at Nespresso, we have an ambition because it's important to have an objective. And we would like to be recognized as the ultimate coffee experience worldwide. So I understand that many companies have similar ambitions and they obviously strive for something very similar, but at the end of the day, it's about something which you want to reach at one point in time. Now, if you have an sound, now you have it back. If you have an ambition, if you have a plan, it's good to know where to guide yourself in. So you need to have a strategy in place. So what we have is what we call the 10 guiding principles for us. One, starting with quality is no coincidence. So it's not by accident that you create quality. So you need to really take care about it. You need to make sure that quality is built from the very beginning, starting at the tree. Sacrifice to select, what I mean with that is, it's about really selecting what you need. And we know at Nespresso that we can only really use a minimum amount of the world production, highest quality coffee, which is around 1 to 2% of it. And so we make a lot of sacrifice, and we ask also amongst our suppliers and farmers and cooperative partners about a lot of sacrifice to make it happen. And keep it fresh is basically to preserve the aroma of the coffee throughout the whole value chain, starting from the tree itself through the final moment of consumption. And choosing choice is about diversity. It's about giving a choice to the consumer, but also for us, there's always a choice. There are sometimes cheaper ways of doing things. There are sometimes easier ways of doing things, but they're not necessarily the best ways of doing things. So we really have this as a dogma. We always choose for the best. And we never settle, we never rest. We have the ambition to always continue to improve, to become better, to work on how we can be leader of a category which we have initially created. And then we have lots of technology, but at the same time you need to combine it with experience, with the art of blending, with a lot of knowledge and expertise of individuals, of people. And we need to look into the science aspect as well, trying to understand why certain things are happening. So it's a good combination, and also to make sure you continue to strive for the better. And the consistency is something we are very keen on, to have consistency in our products so that a consumer always knows when he chooses a particular capsule, what is the taste going to be. And we basically believe that quality leads success. So if you come up with the quality first, the success will come after. And it's about making our own rules and not just following others, but we'd like to change the paradigm. And, of course, everything needs to be ready for the future, so truly sustainable. So I'm digging in 5 of them in a bit more detail. And one is the way we look at our value chain. And this is about the fact that once the coffee has been created by the farmer on the field, the only thing you can do, you can destroy the value created there. But you can't make it better. You can enhance the value. You can get out of the coffee what it is in it, but not more than that. So we are very careful in following the value chain, whether it is then the whole post-harvest treatment, the fermentation process, the sun drying we're looking for, the treatment of the coffee itself, the transportation, and the roasting itself, where there's a lot of technology and science behind, because this is pure chemistry. You're developing aromas in a certain way, depending on temperature, depending on the speed, how you roast the coffee, and the length of the coffee. And that's very different from terroir to terroir, from the regions where the coffees are coming from. So it's all about basically choose up, take the right decision to increase further, to have the ultimate result and the delivery, which is the final cup profile for the customer. And we're making our own rules. So who said that coffee is just... Is that better? Who said that coffee is just there to refill? It's just to, you know, to have a hot beverage. This is much more. And I said the experience we have is that we best strive for a real coffee experience itself. So that's about working with other experts. So we have basically trained more than 300 Michelin star world-class chefs and sommeliers. They come to us in workshops. So they are now recommending coffee the way they would recommend wine with your dinner or with your dessert at the end of the day. Or the chefs are using the particular coffees, Grand Crus, in their recipes the way they have learned it from us. So it's all about changing the way the coffee is used and enhancing the experience itself. So that's one of the ideas we have. And then choose choice. It's something we understand from our consumers. They'd like to have different coffees once in a while. And the Margot Gip is a variety I first tasted more than 30 years ago in the kitchen of my grandmother, who was grinding the coffee by hand and brewing it through a filter. And at that time, the coffee was already very rare. Now we've just released this coffee as what we call a special reserve, which is a very, very small quantity. And it has been very difficult for us to find really this precious, wonderful, nice coffee, which has a very specific flavor. We started to sell it a few weeks ago, and it's amazing how well it's perceived and accepted by people. So something we learn and understand, and we might not come back to, you know, some of you and ask, can we more systematically plant these varieties, because actually consumers really appreciate it. So that's something we'd like to do. We'd like to also explore new areas or just come back to existing ones in different ways. So that's about choosing choice. And then it's about, as I said earlier, never settle, never rest. And you know, there's a say, if you want to be number one, you need to train like being number two. Okay, this is not a good example because Team New Zealand was number 2 at the end. But there's also the say in the America's Cup that there is no second. Okay, so it's really to work hard, and that's something which obviously makes a good fit when we sponsor a team like the New Zealand team in the America's Cup, because these guys are really ambitious in making sure they're striving for perfection. So that's very much the philosophy we have, and that's something we work on as a company in all aspects. And the future proof is something which is very relevant for us. It's now 11 years ago that we launched the Nespresso AAA Sustainable Quality Program here in Costa Rica at Cinta Café. So the first cluster, as we call it, we had here in La Georgia, together with ECOM. And since then, this program has continued to evolve. So why did we choose to do, again, something different? Why didn't we take just an existing certification scheme? It was very simple. At that time, believe it or not, nobody talked about sustainable quality. nobody had in the standards quality aspect. So we were the first who brought that in and rolled out a program which is fully embedded in the Nespresso business model. And we have just reached last year our objectives to source more than 80% of our coffee through this sustainability program. So this is about involving the farmers. It's built on long-term loyalty. It's something we are very proud of to do, and we have more than 60,000 coffee farmers in 8 different countries working with us on a long-term basis. And they have, because we don't have really direct contracts with them, they have shown a lot of loyalty because we are there. We continue to work with them with more than 250 agronomists on a day-to-day basis in order to support them and also adapt the program to the needs. So that comes back to changes like you have in the environmental side or on the legislation side. So that's very important. And what we also do, we'd like to honor them. So we give awards to the farmers and we invite them also to come to Switzerland because it's important for us as a company that they meet with our with our employees, because our employees are very interested as well in where the coffee is coming from and who is responsible for that. So I have a little film showing the award we had 2 weeks ago in Lausanne, where our headquarters is. Unfortunately, David Garcia, who is the award winner here from Costa Rica, is not in town, so we couldn't have him here sharing a bit of his impression there, but we know that the farmers also appreciate it. One of the farmers, it was an Indian gentleman, he said, "You guys are really working here after the factory visit." So that was quite a rewarding testimonial for us and our employees to hear as well. So now, what are the consequences of, let's say, the right response to change? So at Nespresso, when we first started the company in '86, we really created a category over the time. This is not just a niche. The portion coffee segment has become a significant category in the coffee sector. It has been something which obviously is looked at. And there's a say in English, you know, if the best way of flattering is you know, to see how well you're copied, and we have more than 130 different copies now in the system market. So only 40 or so came this year. So there's a lot of evidence that apparently people have quite an interest in what we're doing at Nespresso and trying to join this. But it's also something which is creating value. So we estimate that around 6% of the world's coffee is consumed in portion segment, but the value creation obviously is much larger. We talk about 20%. So the potential is huge. When I'm asked the question, you know, what's happening to Nespresso now, all this competition being there, as I said, we'd like to look forward, and this segment is so big, there's only 6% worldwide coverage. The potential is enormous, and we believe that this is really the trend for the future right now. And also obviously come up with new innovations and new systems. So it's also about the way we have changed the distribution of coffee. Some of you may know that Nespresso is not something you can buy in the supermarket. It's not on the shelf. We have a club system with a few million club members who can get the coffee from us in different ways. They can buy it in one of our boutiques we have. They can buy it through the internet, or they can call our customer relationship centers, or they can just buy it at very exposed places. So a new way of distribution is what I have here is the Cube. This is in the Barcelona airport, where people just come back from flights, and they can grab the coffee on the way back. And actually, it's quite interesting because I have rarely seen people taking pictures in front of a vending machine with themselves in front of it. So it seems like people really appreciate also the way we think about service we provide. So like in most of the countries, if your machine is broken, you can return it and you get a machine during the time we repair it. So those kind of things are coming in addition. So it's building what I said earlier, this customer experience. It's thinking beyond just the moment of pleasure. It's giving you much more of a loyalty creation also amongst your customers. And that's something we realize more and more. So we think it's now really the time to move from a commodity to a customer experience. And we pay a lot of attention to customer research. We listen to the customers. We're trying to understand also how they consume coffee, whether it is with milk. In some countries like Australia, with 95% of the coffee consumed with milk, or just black, intense, light. All of this is very important, and we need to respond to this in order to make sure that the customers continue to enjoy the products we are producing. And they are giving us feedback, and the social media, obviously, this goes back to the millennium generation mainly. They are communicating with us. They tell us what they want. They come back and say, we want to have this coffee back, or we want you to have a new flavor in your coffees. And we have now close to 4 million fans on Facebook who really talk to us. And they appreciate the brand. They are also becoming big fans of the brand. And obviously, having a celebrity which is known all around the world, which we don't use in the United States, but in the rest of the world, is helpful. And it's also the way he's talking about his Nespresso experience is very specific. And as we just have a new TV commercial which went on air a few weeks ago, I took the opportunity to bring it with me and to share that with you as well.
Jean. Nice shoes.
Hi. Thank you so much. Would you like meal?
No, thank you. George? Jean? Yeah.
How far would you go for an espresso?
What else? What else? What else? What else? What else?
So this is really about bringing in the way we do business, the way we work. I talked about change, adapting to it. Now to talk about how far would you go? So we're embedding this, and our celebrity quite likes to play himself in it. That's actually where he took his summer vacation. That's where he is every year. and we just do the commercials almost at his home place there. So it's very much about being authentic, but also talking about the brand and the experience itself, and that's something he has been very supportive at. Now, the How Far campaign is on air there, but at the end of the day, it's also about how far can we go as a company in sustainability, because that's really where the future lies, and working with coffee farmers, working with cooperatives, with exporters, with all of you, with NGOs, in making sure all of these influence factors we have talked about earlier are mitigated or, wherever possible, anticipated. That's one of the objectives we have, and that's what we are aiming for. So that's why, after having had launched very ambitious objectives back in 2009 for 2013 to source 80% of our coffee from the AAA program, but also to reduce the carbon footprint by 20%, and also have recycling capacity in place of 75%, we got together again with those people we are sharing our ideas with. We have an advisory board with representatives from Fairtrade USA, Fairtrade US, Europe, Rainforest Alliance, the heads of it, but also other NGO partners and our celebrity. So we discussed in the advisory board our next objectives, and we have a small summary of the latest activity we are now launching at Nespresso. That's my last film already.
If I was going to be involved for a long-term basis with this company, who I liked very much, I needed to understand what they really were doing and what they should be held responsible for.
Investment is around 500 million Swiss francs for the next 6 years. Our actual concrete commitments is to be, by 2020, 100% sustainably sourced coffee, 100% sustainability managed aluminium, and 100% carbon neutrality on our operations. I'm happy to work with a company that's willing to do these things, not just because it's profitable, but also because it's the right thing to do.
If I may suggest to leave you with one thing, then please embrace change. Thank you very much.